back in car culture. In this episode, we'll be working on the 240Zombie. This will be a part 1 of 2 series for this build. This part 1 series will be working on the front suspension. Basically what we're going to do is just be refreshing up the suspension, get it ready for driving. The first thing that we did was we got all new bushings. So we bought energy suspension polyurethane bushings for the control arm, strut rod, sway bar end links, as well as the sway bar bushings. Including from that, we got some Moog ball joints, as well as Moog tie rods. So basically the entire front suspension will be brand new, as well as we put on the 280Z suspension, which you'll see in a moment. So guys, we'll be doing the suspension now. Basically to get started on this refresh, what we're going to do is you take your control arm, and on these bushings they have like a metal ring in here. So what you do is you just kind of hollow out all the rubber and then cut it into 4 places, and it should slide out. Or otherwise you can just take a press of some type and press it out. So basically, so then you can enter this. So what happens with energy suspension is that they're just 2 pieces. You just slide them out from each other. They got a metal little ring in there in the middle. And then basically these control arms can go either side. But what matters though is the size of the bushing. Since it has a smaller collar and a bigger collar, the bigger collar and the 240Zs always go on the back side. So that you'll have, or the bigger collar to the back. So basically what you gotta do is just kind of get them in straight. Usually take a hammer of some type. And then you can do it for the other side too. It's a little easier to get the ring out. So you just get started and then you can kind of even it out. And there you got it. Now the control arm is ready to be installed. Alright, so now it's time to install the control arm. Basically it's this easy, you just gotta slip this back in there. But you got 2 options here, is that when you're installing the new bushings, this is the original control arm bush or bolt that goes through there, and this is a 280Z one. So for the 280Z one, it goes in there great. But the thing you gotta do is just gotta take a drill bit and hollow out these holes right here. It's not much. It's not going to really do anything, just to make it a little bigger. But then you can run the 280Z control arm bolts. Alright, so next is just to get that control arm in there. It's going to be a little harder due to the polyurethane rubber is a lot harder than the stock rubber. But eventually you'll have to just work your way through there. Once that's in there, you can slip the bolt through and then tighten it up, but don't tighten it too much because you'll have to move it around when you are trying to connect the ball joints and stuff to the new strut. Alright, so next thing is just to get the new ball joint onto this control arm piece. Basically this goes in this way, and then the new castle nut goes in there. And then all you gotta do is make sure you line up the casting nut with this so you can put your cotter pin through. Alright, now that you got the ball joint into the caster arm, or whatever you call this thing, it's time to put a cotter pin through there. So all you gotta do is just slip it through the thing, push it down a little bit, take your thing. You bend the top over, obviously, and then you can just snip the remaining off the bottom. And then it's ready to throw in. Alright, next thing to do is to throw the ball joint piece onto the strut arm. Basically it's just attached to these 2 bolts right here. The ball joint piece that you put goes into there. And then basically you just gotta tighten it up. Alright guys, so the first thing I found out is you just take the controller arm back off. I just didn't tighten all the way. So basically what I'm going to do is get your bolt onto your thing right away. Stick it through the hole that it needs to go through. And it's just easier to do it this way, is to just flush it out and just mount it through like this. Okay. So I'm not going to tighten them all the way, I'm just going to tighten them so they're pretty flush and they're holding onto it pretty well. Pretty good. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is swing it so it goes back around like that. And then you can bring the control arm back up. This gets a little tricky. You kind of want this piece to be straight, the strap to be straight, and then you can kind of pull it in there. Alright, next is to get the tension rod on there. So the tension rod is kind of a cool piece where on the singular like pivot control arm, what this piece does is just so it doesn't rock back and forth like this. Alright, I actually found it a lot easier to just take the strut rod out and then get the bushing on the thing first. So then you can slide the collar down all the way, because otherwise it's just going to flush out with the threads. Once you have it on there, just slide it back on like you did before. Hold on straight. Push on the back bushing. And then get your other backing plate and the nut, slide it on there. Leave it extremely loose, but tight enough to keep it on there, so then when you jack up this piece, and then you push through the missing ball joints, and then it's a lot easier. Alright, there we go, finally got it on. So now what I'm going to do is put everything back on here. I really didn't tighten that up, but as you can see, or if you can't see that really. Anyways, the tension rod wants to stay parallel, that's the whole purpose of it, to the ground. So to bolt these things on, you're going to have to raise it up. So as you can see right there, the suspension is fully depressed, and the tension rod is tightened on a decent amount. As you can see, this thing, to push it onto there, it's going to be really difficult. So far it has to go down, and then trying to figure out the bolts and align it, it's not going to be fun. So what I found out on the other side when I did it, the easiest thing to do is to jack up the control arm, which brings up everything. So you can see it's stirring it up a little bit more. You might have to do it quite a bit for this car because the tension rod is pretty parallel. Once you get... Alright guys, to give you a little overview of what I had to do with the tension rod, is basically what you have to do is you have to jack it up all the way. Then you get the tension rod into its place, bolt that down enough, and then pretty much just jack up the control arm up, and then just line up the bolts, the missing bolt or the empty bolts onto the ball joint, and it slips right in. So basically what's next though, since we got everything in there, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the suspension. Basically the 280Z suspension that came with is some Ebach lowering springs on some nicer struts. Came with the whole brake, you know, everything. Compared to the older, rustier suspension that came with the 240Z, I'm going to try this out. I've heard that the 280Z suspension on 240Z raises it up, but when I compared these two, they look the same, and then these being lowering springs, hopefully it gives it a drop. But if not, I can easily just swap out to these ones, or possibly maybe even a lower spring from the 280Z, but we'll figure it out. Actually, we'll figure it out in a few seconds once we get the rest done. Alright, it's time to conclude this. So basically the suspension's all done. Like I said, I'm going to put new tie rods in there. I'll show you in the part 2 when I do the rear suspension, but it's pretty easy. The new boots will go in. I'm going to get some new tie rod or sway bar end links. That's all this simple stuff. You know, no big deal. So basically, this is how the suspension is going to be. I'm just going to put the wheel back on it. We're going to drop it, see the ride height, and then conclude the video. So these are the wheels that came on my parts car as well. They're 15s. That's right. They're 15 Koenig rewinds, I believe the name is what these things are for. They're pretty sweet looking wheels, kind of classic look for the Datsun. They came with like brand new Falcon ZX, I think they're ZX, yeah, ZX tires. Not super light, but they're pretty light. A kind of a cool aspect that I'm kind of looking forward to is that I kind of want to do a rallycross with this car. So it would be kind of cool actually to have a higher suspension, but a sportier suspension for a rallycross situation. So I guess we'll see what happens. So there we have it. We concluded the 240Z Part 1 suspension upgrade. Basically what we did is we just bought a polyurethane energy suspension kit, front control arms, strut rods, sway bars, and then we bought Moog ball joints as well, installed those onto the new 280Z lowering springs that came on the parts car. There's a few things we'll have to do later once the parts come in, as we did a steering rack boot as well as polyurethane sway bar end links. I haven't installed those yet because I haven't gotten the mail, so we'll be including those in part 2, but you'll see that later. So that's basically what we did for part 1. If you guys are interested in checking out our Instagram channel, it's Minnesota Car Culture, just like our YouTube channel. We do daily posts on my Datsun. Roman has his like G35 and all that stuff. If you guys are interested, it's Minnesota Car Culture. Other than that, thanks for watching.